Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. Well, we're on part 3 of our story tonight, and what has actually happened is that Brooke went to the fair with her two best friends, Fern and Althea. Brooke is inclined to be quite neurotic like her mother, because her mother has a reputation, and even her father, for being predisposed to worrying about absolutely everything. Now, she goes to the fair and is not very keen about having her fortune read by the gypsy fortune teller, but she goes ahead, having been goaded by her friends, and the gypsy fortune teller tells her something that she's not very happy to hear, that she could potentially actually kill someone in a car accident, and so she needs to be very careful that that doesn't happen. So Brooke is so alarmed by what the fortune teller has told her that she becomes completely teetotal. The trouble is, she goes to a party a year later. It's her best friend's party, her 28th birthday party, and she goes along and she's a bit of a stick in the mud. So what do her two friends do? They secretly ply her non-alcoholic punch with alcohol, and I think that's going to have serious ramifications on Brooke. So let's see where the story takes us. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with part 3 of our story tonight. It would seem plying Brooke with vodka in her non-alcoholic punch had almost certainly done the trick. They could see their friend, who was usually as stiff as a piece of hardboard, was loosening up significantly. She had become tiddly, but the great news was that her inhibitions appeared to have melted away. She was chuckling and laughing with the rest of the party guests, and appeared to be having the time of her life. She began flirting tirelessly with everyone, including the Red Rose family big ginger tabby called Popcorn, who eyed her with wary yellow eyes, and then hurriedly scrambled away, finally taking refuge under the couch, as Brooke began declaring her undying love to the cat, who was not used to such effusive gestures. Even Mrs. Redrose, who was Fern's mother, and was supervising the party, as she was a caterer by profession, had turned around and asked her daughter what the hell was wrong with Brooke, for she seemed rather inebriated. "I don't know how to say this to you, Fern, but Brooke has had far too much to drink tonight. She seems to find everything hilariously funny. A moment ago she was proposing to Popcorn, our cat, who gave her the brush off and scampered under the couch to hide from her. And I'm quite sure Arthur's doing much the same. If that wasn't bad enough, she's been affectionately stroking the leather couch in the lounge and telling it what a good girl it is. There's something terribly wrong with Brooke tonight. I've never seen her behave like this before. She's in no condition to drive from the party. We need to make sure we keep a firm eye on her." "Oh, Mum, keep your hair on," said Fern. "This is my party. You know what a stick in the mud Brooke can be. I blame her parents for making her increasingly paranoid these days. She refuses to drink any alcohol at the moment. She's become teetotal ever since we went to that fair last year. She gets overly cautious about everything, is always looking over her shoulder. It's a good thing for her to let her hair down once in a while and enjoy herself for a change. Surely you saw how miserable she looked when she first arrived at my party. Now she's having a whale of a time and wildly flirting with everything and everyone. I don't recall a time I've seen her unwind like this. And I really don't care a jot if she's proposing to our cat and telling the couch that she's a good girl. At least she's having a ball, and it's a long time since that has happened." "Oh, I don't know. What on earth has got into you, Fern? If you consider wildly flirting with a couch and proposing to our very bemused cat your idea of having a good time, you're in for a rude awakening. Brooke is inebriated, extremely drunk. What did you do? She's taken something weird, hasn't she? Don't tell me you've slipped something into her drink to make her go a little loopy." Mrs. Redrose could see Fern suddenly going very red in the face, and she let out a heavy sigh. You didn't, did you, Fern? I hope to God you didn't. You wouldn't be that reckless, would you? What are you talking about, Mum? Said Fern, trying to look innocent. Don't give me that butter wouldn't melt in your mouth kind of look, Fern. I've known you all my life. You are my daughter, after all. So do me a favour and quit playing the innocent with me. Did you or did you not spike Fern's non-alcoholic punch tonight? Ma'am, relax, won't you? I just put a little vodka in her drink, that's all. No big deal. She needs to let her hair down for a change, and alcohol can loosen your inhibitions. I just want Brooke to have a great time at my party. I don't want her being a wet blanket all night long and ruining the party spirit for everybody. Sweetheart, I know you mean well, but spiking someone's drink is completely reckless. Quite frankly, I'm disappointed in your insouciant behaviour. I would have expected a lot better from you, Fern. If Brooke wants to be teetotal, then that's her decision, not yours, and you need to respect that. You're going to have to make absolutely sure that Brooke gets home safely tonight. And for goodness sake, do not under any circumstances let Samantha Bordeaux see her daughter arriving home in such a dreadful state as this. I won't hear the end of it from her, I can assure you of that. What the hell were you thinking? Don't worry, Mum. I'll make absolutely sure that Brooke gets home safely tonight. Or better than that, she can actually stay overnight with us and go home in the morning. And by then she'll definitely be sober, and Samantha Bordeaux will know nothing about it. Well, make sure you don't keep her out of your sight for a second. I don't want her wandering off in this dreadful state. If she fell into our swimming pool, God forbid, she'd probably drown. Her head is all over the place this evening, and God only knows how Samantha Bordeaux would react if she was to see her daughter right now. That's not going to happen, Mum, and I'm not going to put any more vodka into her drink, I promise. I'm sure she'll sober up quickly. I'm so very glad you have so much faith in that, Fern. I'm afraid I don't share it with you. But you are the one that is responsible for lacing Brooke's drink. So I want you to watch her all night, like a hawk, because I don't want that girl wandering off and doing something stupid. Fern had said her goodbyes to most of the young folk that had attended her party, but there was a residue of close family friends that had stayed behind and chosen to sleep over. They were all contentedly gathered around the fire pit, telling ghost stories together. No one observed Brooke, who had been placed in a bed in the spare bedroom to sleep off the excesses of her alcohol. Nobody saw her rising from her bed and fumbling around awkwardly as she made her way to the front door to get to the driveway where her car was parked. She knew she needed to get home as quickly as possible. She had no idea how long she'd been asleep for in the Red Rose spare bedroom, or how she'd even got there in the first place. She was feeling groggy and struggling to keep her eyes open. It was a continuous battle for her. It didn't do to drive home in this sleepy state, so she'd better leave right away before things got significantly worse for her, as Brooke didn't want to stay at the Red Rose house overnight. She was not sure how late it was, but even in her slightly inebriated state, she had a vague recollection of telling her mother she'd be home very late, and not to wait up for her. But knowing her mother, if she didn't return home at all, her mother would be overwrought with worry. Brooke knew she didn't need to say goodbye to Fern, because that would mean looking for her, and common courtesies at this time of night certainly did not need to be engaged, as Fern would perfectly understand Brooke's need to get home. At least the alcohol had worn off, as Brooke was becoming marginally more sober, but she was still feeling tiddly and a wee bit confused and disorientated, as so much of the party had become all but an ambiguous blur for her. If the truth be told, she couldn't really remember the party very well, which was peculiarly odd, as Brooke couldn't understand why her memory had become so obscure and so vague when she hadn't drunk a thing, and yet she felt as if she'd drunk a whole crate of beers. Brooke's head was thumping violently, as if a headache was suddenly brewing. It hadn't even occurred to her that her two best friends had been plying her with alcohol all evening, and Mrs. Redrose had told her daughter that no more vodka could be permitted to be sneakily placed into Brooke's punch under any circumstances, and yet Brooke was oblivious to all of this. Brooke wobbled rather precariously on her long, slender legs, her knees almost giving way beneath her, but thankfully, against all the odds, she managed to find her way to her car. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Brooke had looked so elegant this evening. Her long, slinky evening dress that was covered in silver glitter looked as if she was wearing a starry night on her dress, and some people had even said as much. But right now she could feel the nausea rising up in the back of her throat. She didn't feel terribly good, and she was sure her reflection reflected how dreadfully bilious she felt. It was so uncomfortable wearing her strappy silver high heels this evening that her mother had warned her might actually break her neck if she didn't watch where she was going. But such trivial concerns did not filter into her mind, muddied by the ravaging effects of alcohol, that Brooke wasn't even aware she'd actually consumed. It was a dark, congenial night, where the abundant trills of crickets and frogs happily filled the atmosphere with their cheerful chorus, and the smell of lingering wood smoke wafted in the air. No one observed Brooke disappearing like a faint ghostly shadow, as everyone lightly assumed that she was lying safely on one of the beds in the Red Rose spare bedroom, sleeping off a rarely bad hangover. Brooke shivered as a cool breeze antagonizingly nudged at her bare skin, rather like an uncomfortable cold hand. She'd have liked to have been wearing a sweater tonight, for the temperature had dropped significantly. She sank gratefully into her car seat, like a slumped-over rag doll. She was still fighting the relentless urge to fall asleep again, and wondered why she'd been off all night. Perhaps she was coming down with something. She found the car keys in their usual place in the glove compartment, and started up the engine with a mighty bang, and then drove away into the night like a ghostly shadow of a car that was there 1 minute and gone the next, for no one even saw her leave the Red Rose premises that night. Once she left the illumination of Fern Red Rose's farmhouse, her car descended into the darkness, for in this part of the Pacific Northwest there were no street lights to be seen anywhere, as most of the houses in this Pacific area were situated on sizable plots of land, and wherever you looked there were tall, lofty trees, and yet more and more trees, for it was a heavily wooded area, substantial in size. So driving around at night could be extremely intimidating, but Brooke had done it often enough when she was sober. So driving, even at night in her groggy state, seemed almost instinctive. Her head was thumping madly, and she felt the nasty nausea welling up in the back of her throat. Why was her mind such a foggy blur, as if she was trying to look through a veil of mist to remember the last few hours of the party? Maybe she'd got some food poisoning from one of the hors d'oeuvres. Perhaps it was the lobster she had eaten. It must have been that. Seafood had always made her feel rather queasy, and it would explain the reason why she was feeling so off-colour. All Brooke could think about was the lovely warm bed that awaited her at home, but unbeknown to her, her driving on this night was erratic to say the very least. The roads were so dark, but even though Brooke was feeling woozy, she knew her way home like a migrating pigeon, even with her eyes closed. In an instant, like a flash of light, she suddenly observed a dark shadow walking down the middle of the road, but her heavy eyelids, arrested by the desperate need to fall asleep, felt like concrete blocks that were weighing her down. She squeezed her eyes tightly together to get a better focus, for her vision was fuzzy. She could see the figure was carrying a torch, and didn't appear to have heard Brooke's car approach. Brooke's reaction times under the influence of alcohol had slowed down significantly, despite having taken an advanced driving course earlier in the year. She slammed her foot down on the brakes as hard as she could, but instead of pressing the brakes, she accidentally put her foot on the accelerator, so her car abruptly swung forwards, knocking the figure over on the road. Oh my God, what had she done? She felt a loud bumping sound beneath her wheels, and in that moment she was jolted out of her drunken stupor by the shock of what had just transpired. For a moment she stopped her car and scrambled awkwardly out of the door. She ran over to the figure lying on the ground. She recognized the man immediately. It was Philip Joubert, the man from her past, that had been nursing a crush on Brooke for years that she knew nothing about. He was lying on the road groaning and clutching his leg uncomfortably, and there was so much blood everywhere. Brooke had never seen so much blood. She was certain that he was dying. He called out to her, "Brooke, stay with me! Don't go! Don't go! Get help!" But Brooke ran over to a bush on the side of the road and violently began to hurl up the contents of her stomach, and it just didn't seem to stop. The sight of all that blood was just all too much for her, and had made her stomach recoil. Suddenly she remembered the gypsy's premonition, and realized to her horror it had all but come true. She had killed a man on the road. Once she had finished heaving up the contents of her stomach, she was about to rush over to Philip Joubert, who was still lying in the middle of the road. She knew she had to get help, even though help would be a long time in coming, and she suspected that Philip Joubert was already dead because she had run him over. Her reaction times were shrouded by the groggy state that made everything she attempted to do feel laboriously ungainly and incredibly clumsy. She had to use her cell phone, didn't she? But where was it? It wasn't in the car. But then she had a vague recollection. She'd left the purse on the swing chair on the Red Rose patio. So fat lot of good it was for her now. She'd have to drive back to the Red Rose house to get help, and she knew it would be too late by the time she got back. She was caught in a nightmare, and she wasn't sure what to do. All she could think about was that she had killed Philip Joubert. He might be holding on to life by a thin silver thread, but that silver thread might just snap in any moment. She was caught up in the most dreadful nightmare, and wasn't sure what she should do. She moved away from the bush, where she'd been hurling up the contents of her stomach for a long time. Her eyes carefully darted towards Philip Joubert, who was still lying in the road. There was a heaviness in her heart, for she feared very much that he was dead. But then she saw them, rushing towards Philip. What the hell? Was she even seeing right? There were two massive creatures, who had reached Philip Joubert and were standing over him. She had to be dreaming. She must be dreaming. What was she even seeing? It just couldn't be right, could it? What on earth was wrong with her? Now she appeared to be hallucinating, seeing things that just could not be there, as if she was caught up in a parallel universe. She could hear the urgent sounds of two distinct human-like voices that were speaking in a strange, unorthodox language that she'd never heard before. They sounded like two paramedics trying to fuss over a dying patient and administer life-saving procedures. Brooke realized that she was seeing two massive Bigfoot. They were so gargantuan in size, she felt completely daunted by their mere presence. They didn't even appear to notice or observe her presence. They were swooning over Philip Joubert. She could hear Philip Joubert groaning. The two voices were speaking together very fast, backwards and forwards. One voice sounded distinctly female, the other male. "Mantala, kolapatina, hanshankwi, hasipata, huko, hila, dikato, omatisa." The male Bigfoot was tearing up Philip's shirt, bandaging his leg up, as if making a tourniquet for him. Brooke was completely spellbound. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She wondered if she was completely losing her mind. Finally, the male Bigfoot stood up straight and tall, and Brooke nearly fainted by the sheer size of him, for he was easily 9 foot, and so wide across the shoulders. He hurled Philip over his shoulders, and the two Bigfoots disappeared into the night, like two dark shadows. Brooke was now convinced she definitely was losing her mind. There was no doubt about that. Had she just imagined everything she'd seen? It had all happened so very fast. She returned to her car, and once again sank onto the seat. She wondered if it had all been an illusory dream. Finally she started up the engine again, and made her way back home. The tiredness she felt was all-consuming. Even though throwing up had made her feel a little less queasy and a tiny bit more human, she did recall getting through the front door, and then she heard her mother's voice, somewhere in the background, and then everything went completely black. Brooke awoke the following day to a head that was spinning wildly. She felt groggy and had a splitting headache, and nausea clung to the back of her throat. She glanced at the nightstand to look at her clock and did a double take. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. It couldn't be. That was impossible. Had she really been asleep for that long? She sat up for a moment to get her bearings, having no memory of how she'd even got here. She was crippled with confusion, unable to distinguish fact from fiction, and above everything else, she had experienced the most strange dream, all about Bigfoots and Philip Joubert of all people. "Oh, you're up, are you, finally?" said Mrs. Bordeaux, coming into her bedroom, carrying a tray with toast, boiled egg, and orange juice, which she placed in front of Brooke on her bed. But the tone of her voice was one that didn't sound too pleased, so Brooke sensed her mother was not happy with her. "Do you realize what time it is, Brooke?" came her mother's scathing voice. "Yes, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon," Brooke admitted. "I was so tired, Mum. I must have slept in late after the party. I feel really sick and nauseous. I've got a terrible headache." "Well, I can't say I'm surprised. You were as drunk as a skunk when you got in last night. I am absolutely appalled. How could you drink and drive like that? It is completely irresponsible. What were you thinking? You took an advanced driving course. You should know better. You told me you were never, ever going to drink again. You rode into the house last night, looking like a zombie. You were in quite the state, babbling away about Bigfoots and Philip Joubert. Honestly, everything that came out of your mouth last night was nonsensical rubbish. Me and your father had to carry you to bed. I am so disappointed in you. I really am, Brooke. It's a miracle you got home in one piece. That's all I can say. Do you realize you could have driven into a tree or something and killed yourself? Because you weren't all there. You can't drive when you're intoxicated, Brooke. How often have I drummed this into you? But you fail to listen." "But I didn't drink and drive last night. I think I ate something that was off, so I wasn't feeling terribly well. But I'm teetotal, Mum." "Oh, you could have fooled me. Honestly, Brooke, you think I was born yesterday, do you? You came into the house absolutely drunk. And you smelt as if you'd been throwing up as well. It was most unpleasant." "But I only drank non-alcoholic punch, Mum, at the party." "Oh, you can deny it as much as you like, Brooke, but it's not going to wash with me. I know a drunk person when I see one. You were half-cut last night, you really were. Mrs. Redrose was in quite the state, you know. She phoned me up this morning to ask how you were, to make sure you arrived home safely. She was very upset that you drove home from the party last night without any supervision. She said you were supposed to be sleeping over at the house. They even made a bed up for you in the spare bedroom. She said you left your purse on the swing chair, and that your car wasn't in the driveway. So she assumed you must have driven home. She said you were terribly drunk last night. Apparently you proposed to her cat Popcorn and were stroking a couch, telling it to be a good girl. And now you're going to tell me that that was because you ate something that was slightly off. When you eat something that is a little funny, you don't start talking like that, Brooke. You should know that." "You're kidding, right? I didn't do all that, did I? How embarrassing!" "You're telling me. And no, I'm not kidding." "I proposed to the Red Rose cat," said Brooke, looking stumped. "But, Mum, I promise you have my word, I didn't drink any alcohol last night. But I don't remember any of this. Why don't I remember any of it?" "Of course you don't remember. You were drunk, Brooke. You should be absolutely ashamed of yourself for overindulging in alcohol like this. And I've never seen such bizarre behaviour from a drunk in all my born days. Drinking certainly is not for you, my girl. You embarrassed yourself awfully last night. At one point I gather you were dancing on the Red Ferns table, and singing songs with your hairbrush. Everybody was watching you. I gather it was Philip Joubert, that boy from your childhood that helped you down from the table and gave you a glass of milk to try and help sober you up. I gather he was awfully sweet to you. I believe he didn't want you to make a spectacle of yourself. He stayed by your side faithfully all evening, and even put you into the bed in the spare bedroom at the Red Rose house. I understand you were staggering around the place. At some point you must have got up from the Red Rose spare bed and driven yourself home. And frankly, I'm surprised you made it home alive. Anything could have happened to you on that road, Brooke. What on earth were you thinking? I just thank God you took that advanced driving course, because I think it might have very well saved your life last night. Brooke was mortified by her mother's startling revelations. She couldn't believe she had embarrassed herself so much at Fern's party. But why couldn't she remember it all? Mum, don't look at me like that, please. I know you're ashamed of what I did last night. But I promise you I don't remember any of this. Everything is such a blur. I remember arriving at Fern's party. I remember sitting on the swing couch there overlooking the swimming pool. I remember, talking to Philip Joubert. He came over to me and we had a nice chat. But after that, everything goes blank. Of course everything goes blank, and of course it's a blur for you. If you drink so much, what do you expect? You came into the house last night looking a sorry sight, like something the cat had dragged in. And even the cat drags in better-looking things than you were last night. Frankly, your father couldn't believe how dreadful you looked. He was utterly dismayed. You could have killed yourself last night, Brooke. I want you to get that into your head. Everyone knows you do not drive with alcohol in your system under any circumstances. You returned home prattling on about Bigfoot and about Philip Joubert. Honestly, love, I don't know what got into you last night. You weren't your normal, reliable self. Oh, I can't believe any of this. I just don't understand. I had no intention of drinking at Fern's party, Mum. I told you I've given up alcohol for good. So why is last night so foggy to me? Someone must have spiked that punch I was drinking. That must be it. Don't be in denial, love. It's very, very unattractive. There's nothing I loathe more than someone who doesn't take responsibility for their own actions. You should be ashamed of yourself. What were you thinking? I don't know, Mum, said Brooke, tears spilling down her cheeks. I can't believe I embarrassed myself like this. That's the least of your worries, dear. Next time you go to a party, your father will be dropping you off himself and picking you up. And I would appreciate it if you give up alcohol for good, because it could be the death of you, Brooke, if you're not more careful. We cannot have a repeat of what happened last night. Philip Joubert's account. I have been in love with Brooke Bordeaux since I was about 8 years old. I was too shy to express my feelings towards her, and as I got significantly older, my shyness became all the more crippling for me. I found myself completely incapable of even asking Brooke out for a casual date. I was terrified of being rejected by her, so I would watch her from a distance, like you might appreciatively observe a beautiful bird of prey soaring in the sky above your head. But if you get close to the bird, it's certain to fly away. I guess I felt that way about Brooke. Of course, over the years I've dated lots of other women, but I was not caught up in the fear of rejection with those people, because if the relationship went pear-shaped, it would be easy to pick up the pieces and start all over again. I guess you could say my heart was never invested in any of those relationships. I could handle these women letting me down very easily. But if Brooke Bordeaux refused my advances, it would quite literally have been the end of the world for me. I know people out there say there are many fish in the sea, but I beg to disagree. I had tunnel vision as far as Brooke Bordeaux was concerned, and there was no one out there that was more suitable for me than she was. I knew I wanted her to be my wife since the age of 8, as ridiculous as that may sound. I never told anyone I was nursing such feelings towards her, Because when you're 8 years old, you're not really supposed to be thinking about who you will marry one day. But I just knew Brooke was the girl for me. I had become a successful entrepreneur in my business and made a great living for myself. I was confident and assertive when it came to my business practices, but with a woman like Brooke Bordeaux, whenever I was in her company, I became all but a blubbering idiot. Even when I spoke to her, I made a complete spectacle of myself. I was so nervous. I was never completely sure of what she thought about me. I guess she assumed I was desperately shy and demure by nature. As children growing up, she knew me as the boy with very few words, who would give her a shy smile and hurriedly look away. I was terrified she'd be able to see my devotedly adoring puppy dog eyes drooling over her like a dog over a bone. I remember when I was 16 years old, I finally summoned up the courage to ask Brooke out. She was sitting on the lawn at school reading a book, and as I walked over to her, another young man came up to her from absolutely nowhere, and I could see them talking and laughing together. So my confidence took a staggering nosedive, and I scurried away like a frightened pigeon. Brooke went out with Tom Spikes for about 4 years, I believe, and they seemed almost inseparable. But one day I learnt the surprising news that they had broken up. I felt defeated rather than triumphant about the great news. You see, Tom Spikes was nothing like me. He was the antithesis of me in every regard, and it concerned me that he was Brooke's type. He was one of these people that was openly assertive, cocky, highly opinionated, and exceedingly arrogant. I've never been like that. Tom Spike was very rough around the edges, and had a propensity to be quite direct to the point of rudeness. He was the kind of guy that abandoned chivalry to the side of the road and forgot to be a gentleman. Over the last few years, I had enjoyed 3 long-term relationships with women, all that went completely pear-shaped. I think by then my mother was exasperated by what she saw as an extreme inability on my part to commit. My mother was convinced that my last girlfriend, Olivia, would one day become my wife. In truth, I think she rather fancied Olivia as her new daughter-in-law, so to speak. She even brought Olivia a bunch of bridal magazines, probably as a way of putting pressure on me to propose. My mother presumptuously thought that I was stalling and needed a push in the deep end. I rather suspect the two conspired together, because my mother wanted to get this detached son of hers to finally make a commitment. Olivia was of course showered with all these bridal magazines, and began to show me pictures of all the dresses, saying how pretty they were. She began to look at me with doe eyes, as if she was half expecting me to drop to my knees and suddenly propose to her. It genuinely scared the bejesus out of me. I guess the insurmountable pressure put on me made me quickly end things very neatly with her. And yes, I broke her heart in the process. But I knew I couldn't marry her when my heart faithfully belonged to someone else, even though the person whom my heart belonged to didn't even know that. If it wasn't bad enough that I'd hurt my ex-girlfriend, my breakup with Olivia appeared to have crushed my mother considerably, who didn't handle the bad news well. Anyone would think I'd broken her heart, and she was the one that was being dumped. I guess she was convinced I'd marry Olivia. She was very fond of her, and they had a great deal in common, and would often go off to town together, enjoying coffee at a local coffee shop, or even spending a spa day together. After my breakup with Olivia, when I went around to visit my parents one day, I was to discover my mother sobbing in the corner of the kitchen. All she could say to me through puffy red eyes was, "How could you, Philip? Olivia was perfect for you. Absolutely perfect. What the hell is wrong with you?" After that, my mother slipped into a long, self-pitying sulk, and blatantly refused to talk to me for a long while. So whenever I visited my parents' house, she would ignore me. She was completely devastated about my breakup, but one day she discreetly took me to one side and had it out with me. I guess I knew it was coming. My mother needed to vent, so she let me have it. "What is going on with you, Philip?" she asked me. The tone of her voice was very snappy. "Why did you end things with Olivia? I don't understand you. She was such a delightful young lady. I thought she was so right for you in every way. She's heartbroken, you know, that you ended things with her. She doesn't know what she's done to deserve any of this. And quite frankly, I'm appalled at your treatment of her. You've been going out with her for 2.5 years, and then you drop her like a hot potato, just when it looked like things were getting very serious between the two of you. I wonder if you had an attack of cold feet, perhaps. I rather suspect it was all those bridal magazines that I gave Olivia that scared you half to death. Maybe it made you panic. That was my fault, not Olivia's. I thought buying them for Olivia would give you a push in the right direction, but it seems I was wrong. Olivia hasn't done anything wrong, Mum. It's not personal. We're just not right together, that's all. I think your plying her with dozens of wedding magazines didn't help. Talk about putting pressure on someone to make a commitment. That wasn't nice, Mum. I'm sorry, but it wasn't. No guy would appreciate his mother doing that. Look, Philip, I was convinced you were going to marry Olivia one day. You were so great together, the two of you. You needed a push in the right direction, that's all. And it wasn't fair on Olivia to give her false hope. She invested a great deal in her relationship with you, you know. Well, what you did was give me the push I obviously needed, Mum, as I was able to end things with Olivia. And if you must know, I'm sincerely happy the relationship is finally over. It wouldn't have worked long-term for us. So it's best it's over, even if the demise was not very pretty. But I don't understand you, Philip. Olivia was the whole package. I very much doubt there is anyone out there better than she is. Girls with her qualities are rare to find, let me tell you. This isn't about Olivia. It's about me, Mum. It's not personal. It is the way it is. But you make no sense, Philip. Olivia was so perfect for you in every way. Even your father thought as much. He said she was a keeper. Young women like her don't come along every day. She would make a fabulous mother and wife one day. You can't dispute that. Olivia is very good with children, you know. In your opinion, Mum, she's perfect for me. But we beg to differ on this one. My mother rolled her eyes in exasperation, like she did when I was a little boy and failed to understand a math equation. You know what's wrong with you, Philip? I can see what's going on here. Your generation is caught up in this illusional world that is so out of touch with reality. Everything online is airbrushed. Young people these days glamorize their photographs to make themselves look like magazine cover spreads, so that their physical imperfections are all but ironed away at the touch of a button. So men and women have built up in their head these preposterous, unrealistic expectations about each other that have no bearing on reality whatsoever. Not everyone is that idealistic, Mum. I'm not delusional like that. Of course I know people out there touch up their photographs. I'm not stupid like that. Oh, but you are. So are the people of your generation. Fools is an appropriate word to use on all of them. I hate to burst your bubble, love, but perfection does not exist. You see these women online wondering why they can't get a man, and you can see that no one is ever good enough for them, as their expectations are unreasonably high, which is why they're going to end up very lonely people indeed. And the same could be said for you, son. I've got news for you. No one is perfect, not even the models on magazines, who have been airbrushed within an inch of their lives, so that in reality they look nothing like their cover. When I met your father, he wasn't physically perfect. In fact, his hair was thinning on the crown. His teeth needed fixing up, and he was extremely unfit back then. But guess what? I fell head over heels in love with him. Your father was a big teddy bear with the most charming personality and a huge heart, as well as a fabulous sense of humour. I was aware of his shortcomings as he is of mine, and even these days I've got used to some of his less than redeeming qualities. He leaves the toilet seat up all the time. He can't pick up after himself. And the cupboard is always left open. Cupboards everywhere, all over our house that I have to close. That's what your father is like, but I love him, warts and all. And I'm glad he did get his teeth fixed, I have to admit on that one. But what I'm trying to say is that if you think somebody out there is more perfect than Olivia, you are very mistaken. Mum, you're preaching to the converted. I'm not stupid. I agree with you, lots of people in my generation are idealistic because of social media. And some of the women out there are way too picky about the men they pursue. I'm aware of how superficial and shallow social media can be, and its negative influences over people. Perfection, as you say, does not exist. It's not that I'm not giving any of the women I've met over the years a chance. What you don't get, Mum, is I just don't love them. It would be wrong to marry someone I didn't love, don't you think? What are you saying? You went out with Olivia for 2.5 years and you're saying you didn't love her, said my mother, snorting in disgust. How could you string her along like this, Philip? I liked her very much, Mum. I was fond of her. But love her? No, I did not love her. Well, if you carry on this way, sweetheart, all the good women out there will be snapped up, and you'll be left a very lonely old man. And you know what? You'll only have yourself to blame. Me and your father aren't getting any younger, you know. What's that supposed to mean, Mum? My mother grimaced, looking extremely uncomfortable, as she deliberately avoided my gaze. Well, me and your father would like to be grandparents one day, wouldn't we? It's hard for you to understand that, but at this rate it's never going to happen for us. This time I was the one that rolled my eyes, and I said very scathingly, Talk about laying on pressure, Mum. You did it with Olivia, and now you're doing it again. I'm not laying on pressure. As I was saying, your generation deals more with illusion than in reality. That's why there's so many lonely singletons out there, wondering what they've done wrong, why they've been left on the shelf to be forgotten like an outdated can of baked beans. They fail to see that their expectations in love are far too unrealistic, and had they been more forgiving, they might actually be caught up in a loving relationship. So you think I should propose to Olivia and be done with it? Is that what you're saying, Mum? I can read between the lines. Well, it wouldn't do you any harm, would it? To take the bull by the horns. You're almost 30, for goodness sake, and I think Olivia would make you terribly happy. You will grow to love her, even if you don't love her now. I don't think you'd find better than her. I really don't. She's not the woman I love, Mother, I blurted out indignantly. Why should I marry a woman I don't love? At this, my mother's jaws dropped open. So you are in love with someone, Philip? She asked excitedly, barely able to conceal the bright light that had suddenly come on in her eyes. Who are you in love with, son? You are so secretive. Why didn't you say something? I don't think it's any of your business, Mum. I'd rather not elaborate if you don't mind. My mother was not easily put off and said, Well, why haven't you told me about this woman? And why haven't you asked her out? I mean, I'm getting this strange feeling that she doesn't even know how you feel about her. And if you sit back and do nothing to address your feelings, you're going to let that ship go by in the night. Have you not heard the saying, strike while the iron is hot? You've got it in a nutshell, Mum. The woman that I have feelings for doesn't have a clue how I feel about her. Sweetheart, what on earth is going on with you? Why do you have such a problem expressing yourself? You do need to get your act together, and fast. You need to push up the backside, you really do. You remind me so much of your father in this regard. So reticent you are to make a move on a woman you really like. I was the one that had to ask your father out when we were dating. It seems you're doing the very same thing with this lovely lady. If you don't ask her out, Philip, somebody else will, and then it'll be too late for you. If I wanted to buy a house, for example, I wouldn't just sit back and watch somebody else buy the place from beneath my nose. That is exactly what you're doing here. My mother was absolutely right, of course, as she was about so many things. I'm quite sure that Brooke had no idea how completely smitten I was about her. My infatuation towards her had been clandestine, and I'd been nursing it for a very, very long time. So there we are, that is the end of part 3. Part 4 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.